Hi, everyone. Welcome to Microsoft Endpoint Manager Configuration Manager Deep Dive. For this session, we're going to try something a little bit different and have a bit more of an informal fireside chat. My name is Rob York. I'm a program manager on the Microsoft Endpoint Manager team, and I'm joined today with David James and Jason Giffens. David, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's David James. I'm a director of engineering at Microsoft. I work on Microsoft Endpoint Manager Configuration Manager, as well as desktop analytics, as well as Intune.
My name's Jason, group program manager on the Microsoft Endpoint Manager team. I work closely with David and Rob on all things Windows related and analytics. And I've been at Microsoft for 15 years now.
So we don't have any slides today. We don't have anything in the way of a formal agenda. As I said, we normally do an AMA or a Q&A session as part of our conferences. It's one of my favorite sessions. So we thought we'd try this as an alternative to that. And I guess maybe if we just get started and I ask you some questions that I came up with, and we've got some questions from the field and from our customers and from our wider community. Let's start with the first question. And it'll be the same question to both of you to start off. So David, what do you think the biggest positive outcome of the current work from home reality has been?
Well, I think for us and our team, the biggest positive is the empathy that the engineering team went through to all of a sudden everybody work remote. Many of us with children are learning remote. And so it filled our team with awareness and empathy where the products worked well in an all remote situation and where they didn't and where we needed to do better. And a good positive is how the team mobilized around those learnings. And we like to say the Configuration Manager 2006 release is kind of the work from home release because it was coded while the whole team was working from home, but also with many investments focused on improving work from home, whether it was more CMG improvements, more VPN improvements, just a lot of very customer-driven innovation to enable better remote work and remote learning.
Yeah, I Jason, think one of the better outcomes is really Rob's beard. I think that's probably one of the highlights of the season for me personally, because he used to be so clean shaven. And to build on what David was saying, I think I think we were in a really good position for remote work. Not that we were prescient that this was going to be at the level that it is, but our focus on things like zero trust networks and just the remote worker generally really helped out our customers with, as David mentioned, Cloud Management Gateway, the integration of Config Manager and Intune into the Microsoft Endpoint Manager service. And all of the value we added to cloud to make accessibility of those capabilities easier for customers, particularly in the sudden onslaught of remote work reality. Whereas we were building that for the remote work reality of 2019. Which was, some portion of the workforce being on the internet and being on zero trust networks. And fortuitously, it translated very well into everyone working remote. And I think we're well set up to continue building on that foundation as we move forward.
Yeah, and one thing that really strikes me is I think we were fortunate in that we'd already started a lot of the work in 2002, but also previously. Personally, I've been championing CMG for quite some time now, and the addition of things like Azure Active Directory authentication. But then in 2002, the token authentication, I think, was a huge game changer because it was a real easy fix for a lot of customers to regain management of devices that they'd sent home without any real plan. And even now, we still see customers saying, "Oh, I'm so glad I deployed CMG last summer," or CMG made it so easy. We had to scramble to deploy it, but it allowed us to manage the devices when users had to go home. So yeah, I think we were fortunate to a certain extent because we'd already started on that journey. And as David said, 2006 kind of gave us chance to accelerate some of those journeys. And I'm really proud of what the team's been able to achieve and in order to facilitate customers not losing management of devices as they had to scramble to recover management as users were sent home.
Yeah, in fact, Rob, I like the way you said it, and Jason, you too. Some of the things actually were already in flight, and they took on different meaning or implication. So, for example, our UI that we're now building up for Tenant Attach and Intune, actually, for years people asked for a web UI. One of the reasons is availability anywhere, and now with a lot of that kind of shipping every month as we progress. We didn't build it so that it could be work from home or work from anywhere and administer from anywhere, but now it takes on that meaning and that added significance, which is really interesting. And it also allowed us to kind of bite the bullet on some more expensive investments that maybe we weren't going to do for a while, but now we are, based on talking to customers and get that feedback. So, remote control over CMG is something we're well into, and better task sequences over CMG is something that we're into, and even redoing the CMG so it works better for cloud service providers is something that I think that the whole worldwide shift to work from home really made us look at some of these more expensive things and say, okay, let's just bite the bullet on these now and really kind of buckle down on these.
And I think that could possibly be a world exclusive, because I don't think we've talked about remote control over CMG. So you heard it here
there
first.
You have it.
Unless you heard it earlier. But I think it'll be a world exclusive. Sorry, Jason.
No, another thing. I mean, imagine even a year ago thinking about being able to run, for example, a CM pivot from your mobile device. Things that are realized by moving to the Microsoft Endpoint Manager console, the web-based console, and really access from anywhere, true access from anywhere. And again, we certainly didn't plan the level of remote work that's going on globally. But we were well positioned for it, and we see customers embracing the investments we've made. So we much appreciated there.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing about the internet connectivity. There's a couple of stigmatisms that I think Config Manager has from the fact that it's been around in various forms for 25 plus years now. Slow is one thing, but with the real-time client notification channel, that's just blown out of the water. And the idea that it's just for on-prem, I don't even think Config Manager is an on-prem product anymore. It runs on-prem, but it's cloud. It's updated frequently, and it works anywhere, as you say. And that's true in the sense of the cloud console that we're building. But CMG basically makes everything just work over the internet, and you couple that with the real-time, it's just fantastic to be able to show those capabilities with CM Pivot and Timeline and the scripts feature. Being able to run things immediately over the internet, regardless of where your user is just phenomenal. And even just thinking back over my 11 years of working with the product, the difference from how it looks now versus it did on my first day at Microsoft 11 years ago is, again, phenomenal.
Exactly. And then complementing that with the cloud-based capabilities of, conditional access, the control plane, conditional access claims, compliance policy, all the zero trust networks metaphors that are really the purview of the cloud-based services, and to plug those into to your point, Rob, the 25-year-old on-premises nature of Config Manager, I think it's game changing, and that it's a significant customer value.
Well, I was just going to say, Rob, you said regardless of where the device is, but also, from your phone too, like being able to like execute a CM pivot query from your phone down to someone's laptop that's at their house behind their firewall. I think that just changes the whole paradigm of how we've thought about the product in the past.
That's actually a really cool demo that we should do. Maybe exactly. The first conference.
We're not doing demos, but that's exactly what I was thinking. Is it'd be cool to do a CM pivot demo from my iPhone to your laptop sitting at your house.
Yeah, well, maybe that's the first demo we do when we actually get back to go do on-prem in-person conferences. That we try and do a session where all the demos are done from a phone.
Right.
That'd be pretty cool.
Exactly. So David, we've made a lot of investments in analytics, and I think big data is one of the big strengths we have as a company because of all the insights that we have across our services, and then for providing that as a loop back to the IT professional to not just have insights but have actionable insights. So where do you see? I know we have login times, boot times, and that's kind of our first foray into the analytics world. Where do you see our analytics going in the next 18 to 24 months? What's your vision there?
Yeah, that's a great question. Jason, I know you and I have been talking about analytics or the term you coined of analytics-driven IT for a couple years at conferences and user groups. And, just if you step back and think, here's Microsoft, we're imagining easily over 1 billion PCs on Win 10, as well as Office, as well as ConfigMan with over 150 million and Intune. And all these things are sending a little bit of data, a little bit of signal. Every time your app crashes, you get a UI, do you want to send this report to Microsoft so we can improve this? And we just have heaps and heaps of data that now, over the last couple of years, we've been thinking about and reasoning to, and we can reason on this data and bring it back to customers. And you talked about the ones that we're just barely starting to get to preview, like boot times and startup times. But those aren't so interesting to me. They start to show the potential, but the powerful scenarios are going to be taking signal on app crashes and joining those to signal on app usage, joining those to signals on users on multiple machines, and then we could look at it and say, okay, what's this user's experience? Because if an app crashes all the time, but it's in the background versus an app they use all the time and it crashes once, that one crash is much more significant than a lot of silent crashes. And so getting insight into what is the quality of the end user experience? Because in IT, we're all about optimizing our employees to be able to maximize their job, right? So anything in IT that gets in their way, whether it's crashes or slow boot times, we want to reason across that and give that data to IT so that they can improve it. And then because we're reasoning across that across all the customers, across all of Microsoft's kind of real estate, we see things that no one else can see, and we can see apps that are problematic across all customers. We can see newer versions of those apps. We can suggest apps that should be upgraded. We should suggest apps that should be patched. We can suggest apps that shouldn't be patched because maybe the new patch isn't as good quality. And that's just a couple examples of what we're going to be able to do because we can reason across all these data types and all these data streams.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about really using the analytic signals to really put IT more front and center in the organization as a key business contributor, whereby you can use data and analytics to have more objective conversations over right-sizing hardware, over the uptime of the user, the productivity, the hours lost or gained by certain configurations, the decisions that security might make over new security agents that need to be deployed, but you can objectively then analyze the impact to the end user that might have. So I think that's another key part of our analytics journey is really making IT a key business contributor to the organization and not back of office. Not as long as we're not noticed, we're not doing something wrong, and we want it to be about doing stuff right. So.
Yeah, exactly. And a couple things you called out I really like is internally we have this nickname for this thing we call the hero dashboard, because a lot of times in IT, people outside IT only know about IT if something messes up, if something breaks, right? And the reality is IT does a lot of high value work that we wanted surface to their management chain or to people that can give them more funding to do better. And so being able to not just show what didn't go well, but all the things that did go well. Here's the major investments that we've made. We did this big project to roll out Office. Here was the end user quality experience improvements. We patched Windows. Here was the downtime improvements, right? So being able to show the investments in IT and how they paid off. The other one that you talked about, which I've been using for a while, which I really like, is the right sizing hardware, and not just right sizing what hardware, but when to get that hardware. So, traditionally, and we can see this in telemetry, historically, customers have cycled their hardware every 3 years. And that's, as hardware's improvements slowed down, that's kind of slowed to every 4.5 years. But the reality is, we shouldn't use a blank, one size fits all for everybody. We can look at it and we could say, for this hardware, it's kind of aged faster than the others and it should be replaced. Or, Rob might need a machine with more memory than Jason, and we can look at the app usage and know, for their different workloads, this is the right size of hardware to buy. And by the way, this is when it probably needs to be replaced based on what we can tell from the performance of the hardware and the age of the battery. And just moving companies away from this kind of blanket replace all hardware at a predefined date to a more optimal size for each employee and optimal date for each employee really, to go back to our main goal, is will really improve the end user experience and productivity and probably save companies a lot of money.
Right. And yeah, to your point, Rob definitely needs more hardware spec than I do, because I just do email. Rob does actual work. But
we could probably replace you, Jason, with just a couple of well-written Power Apps.
Yeah, we're not trying to right-size humans yet. We're just working on the hardware.
I'm going to move into your beard, Rob. Speaking of new hardware, Rob, maybe you could touch on some of the innovation we're doing with Autopilot into co-management and the task sequence integration, which is coming soon.
Sure. So one of the big things that we've seen customers try to rationalize as they reimagining and redefining and revolutionizing their build process and more specifically their provisioning process is that Autopilot is great if you don't have a huge amount of complexity or debt that you're still trying to leverage in an on-prem world. If you're already lightweight and using lots of cloud apps and just have a few remaining apps to be installed, then moving straight to Intune only and Autopilot into that scenario, plenty of customers have gone down that route and are brilliantly happy with the TCO reduction that it's enabled them to gain from a previous wipe and load, have a contractor
particularly in remote work as well, right? The direct ship model and not having build centers and tech link desks. So
yeah, huge saving. One customer that we work with, in fact, we visited them together. They calculated that Autopilot was going to save them $25 million over 5 years if they could get in at the beginning of that 5-year hardware refresh, because they're not paying someone to unbox, reimage, rebox, and then all of the image maintenance and all of the back office work that goes into that. $25 million, which that's not peanuts. That's a sizable amount of money, regardless of which business, which industry you're in. But as customers with still that have Config Manager and still have, especially customers with large app estates that they've probably spent a good chunk of the 25 years that they've had SMS into Config Manager and into Current Branch, that's a really hard thing to rationalize. So what the Autopilot into co-management enables customers to do is to bring the best of both worlds. And it's pure co-management. That's what co-management was designed to be. It was designed to allow customers to get that cloud value. It's a term you and I use a lot. Cloud value, being able to get value from the cloud. It's fairly straightforward. And that's what Autopilot into co-management does. It allows you to benefit from that $25 million that you're saving from your provisioning process by moving to Autopilot, but coupling in your existing task sequence with a couple of changes. Strip out the wipe section, strip out the reload of an image, just go with that signature image that your OEM will provide you on the box, and then just lay down the configuration on top via a task sequence. So, bringing down the apps is obviously the crucial one. If you've got a couple of hundred apps being installed in a certain order, the task sequence is great. But also if you've got scripts or changes that you're making to that base image to, go tweak the encryption level or, ensure that the agents are put down in a certain order, the task sequence really enables the customers to do that. And it's something that I've been hoping for a long time, and we've been working on it for a little while. But yeah, that's coming very soon, and hopefully by the time people are watching this, it's available in at least public preview so that customers can really start to bring that co-management workload or Autopilot as a co-management workload. And I've probably spent more time talking about it just now, but if you want to learn more, check out the MEM08 is the other session that I have that talks about that in a bit more detail, and also Michael Niehauser's session, which I think is MEM02. So we cover that in both of those. And as always, if customers want to try out these new things, I'd always encourage them to go to the technical previews. We ship a technical preview at least once a month. They can try out this functionality and get early access to it before it's in production. And it's a really good time to get feedback provided to David and his engineering team, because while it's in TP, it's been actively worked, and we can take that feedback.
Yeah, I love that story because I think that's emblematic of our really what Microsoft Endpoint Manager is. It's the best of both worlds. It's a convergence. It's a convergence of cloud and on-premises. It's not a replacement. It's not a migration. It's not moving to the cloud. It's about attaching to the cloud for additional value, exactly the way you just painted it, taking the best of the traditional task sequence and coupling that with modern provisioning, which is based on Autopilot, and bringing those two together in a way that you get the best of both worlds. And speaking of that, David, maybe you want to touch on. I know we've seen insane growth on Microsoft Endpoint Manager adoption, specifically co-management. Do you want to talk about like kind of the growth curve there and kind of what Tenant Attach is bringing and what the increases look like since COVID, since pandemic, and the increases we've seen there?
Yeah, no, it's I'd have to do the math in my head, but we're getting close to about 10% of the devices out there being cloud attached, either co-managed or tenant attached. Some are both. And tenant attached, Jason, is something that you and I have been talking about for a while that really lowers the barrier to entry of just getting value. Your devices don't even have to talk to the cloud. Just one, if you're already able to receive config-man updates, then you already have the connection to the cloud that's needed for tenant attach. And now, we're seeing about 10% of those devices already cloud attached, and we've only had config-man 2006 out for a couple of weeks. So, that's a good, 14, 15 million between them. So yeah, and we've only been out a couple of weeks, not really on tenant attach. So I think we really got it right in making it easy to use and value for using it. And then co-management is great. You get a little further, you get AAD, start looking at some of those other workloads. So really, we've given a lot of options for customers to harvest or benefit from the power of the cloud. And we're seeing awesome growth for sure.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, I think that you're spot on. I think in the pandemic world, the change control bar is really high. So having high value and low friction is key. And I think Tenant Attach nails the right line between those two. There's significant value with analytics and the help desk scenarios and things like CM Pivot. But there's low friction. You don't have to worry about necessarily enrolling, or you don't have to enroll your clients into Intune to get that value. And you get that, those objects start showing up in the Endpoint Manager console and the web-based console. And again, affords you things like being able to do that from your phone and things like that. So I think the way we struck the right balance there, and the value is definitely there, just based on the crazy adoption that we've seen just in the several weeks we've been in public preview. The adoption of just endpoint analytics and tenant attach generally has been, has skyrocketed. And I think it's super important in this remote work scenario when you don't have a walk-up help desk, and help desk are really underwater, and you really need that centralized view of what's the health of your estate, what's the health of your end user experience, particularly in work from home, where variable ISP and variable internet connections from home. You don't have a corporate network, and you're basically completely distributed from a workforce standpoint. So I think those are significant investments we made. And to your point earlier about where we want to go with these things, with Watson integration and otherwise, the sky's the limit there. And we should probably touch on proactive remediations as well.
It's something that you and I, Jason, have talked about a few times, and you kind of touched on it there, but cloud attach of Config Manager, be it tenant attach or co-management or both, that's really what takes it from being just Config Manager to being Microsoft Endpoint Manager. We announced Microsoft Endpoint Manager as this big thing, and it encompasses so many things, but attaching to the cloud is essentially what makes you Microsoft Endpoint Manager, and it's that power of the cloud. And I'll use that buzzword again, the one that we've created, of cloud value. And that's really, I think if people take away one thing from this session, go attach to the cloud, go enable tenant attach, and go start thinking about co-management and piloting workloads, because there's just a huge amount of value there. And I guess the other thing, if there's two things that I could hope customers go do, the other one's to look at Cloud Management Gateway, because a tenant attached or a cloud attached config manager plus CMG, like that gets you everything that we're talking about. That's like the full management from anywhere, because you're managing the device when it's anywhere. That's what CMG brings you. But then you as the admin are managing the device from anywhere because you have that cloud console. So that's how we think about it internally is, you tenant attach and you've kind of unlocked Microsoft Endpoint Manager. So just wanted to kind of call that out.
What's awesome about that, Rob, is that there's not a single migration operation that you have to do. You don't have to move objects around. You don't have to move your application estate over. It's just converging the two. You just continue business as usual with extended reach and extended complementary capabilities that are empowered by the cloud, by big data, by things like the conditional access control plane over zero trust networks that really just complement what you do today, what customers do today, without having to, migrate applications. I've joked before at various conferences that, the people really love moving from 2007 to 2012 because a migration is always a favorite thing for IT pros to go do. But then you look at our competitive landscape as well, and they're really pushing migration. With our converged Microsoft Endpoint Manager solution, it just works together. I kind of coined the term at MMS last year. It's transformation, not migration. We'll do all the stuff under the covers for you. We're not going to make you migrate a bunch of things so that at the end of the day you move from A to A, and the truck color is a little bit different of who's delivering the content.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to the Autopilot into co-management we discussed. It broke my heart whenever I'd be speaking to a customer and they'd talk about, well, we're looking at Autopilot, and so we're just going to migrate the crucial apps, or we're just going to duplicate the apps. And any time where a customer is thinking about having to duplicate their effort or increase their effort that they have to do, I feel like we've failed, because that's not living up to the simplification, or it's not even living up to the transformation moniker, but it's definitely not living up to the TCO reduction and the simplification that we're building for our customers. And that's one of the reasons I'm so proud of what the team are building right now as we record this for the Autopilot into co-management, because it allows a customer to benefit from that modernization of Autopilot, but to keep their existing investment in the 100 apps, 1,000 apps. We have customers that have 15,000 apps. The numbers are, it's not an insignificant event for them to go, oh, I'll just go move the crucial apps. And I've spoken to customers where those crucial apps are in the hundreds, and they were planning on maintaining them in two places indefinitely. Autopilot into co-management just prevents them from having to do that. So,
exactly.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. So that was question one.
It was an 8-hour session, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think we've touched on a lot of the kind of the points I put down, but if we're going to accept that was just question one, maybe the follow-on question is, what's the biggest negative or the biggest learning point that you've taken from the current world state, and the fact that we're all in our respective homes? David's technically only a mile away, but I've not seen him in 6 months. In fact, this is the most I've seen him in those 6 months. What's the worst thing that's happened? I'm not allowed scissors. It's not my fault.
I thought you were using a Snapchat filter or something.
New Teams feature. That's why it's running so slow. That's a really good question, David. What are your thoughts? I mean, from an engineering and a process perspective, what's been the biggest challenge for your team? You did mention that this is our first entirely remote work release of Config Manager ever, but and that wasn't easy. But what are some of the biggest challenges been from your side?
Yeah, the biggest disadvantage, Jason, I bet you and I share, is not being able to travel around the world and talk to customers face to face and work. We have a TAP program where every 4 months we are quite immersive with customers in our deployments, and that gives us a lot of insight, not just into how our product works, but more importantly, how customers work and how our product fits into their business and where it still has friction or could be better. And so a lot of our innovation is decided or dreamed up on site at customer environments as we see how they use a product. So that's a big disadvantage for us, is our last couple of taps. And we still work with a great set of customers, and they still have deployed the product and helped us get the quality we need. But we're really missing that close connection that we've had, that we learn from, and that really inspires us to build products for our customers. And I also just miss conferences and user groups and going out and talking to customers in bulk. This session that we normally do, it's much better in front of 1,000 people, taking Q&A from the audience, and it's a little unpredictable. But the fact that some of those questions come from places helps us think, okay, we still have innovation or communication we need to do better in these areas because the question's being asked.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the loss of customer connection, I think we're doing a reasonable job at maintaining it. I think there's probably more we're going to have to do as we move into, realistically, I think we're probably only halfway through this work from home situation. I don't like to say it out loud, but I think that certainly feels like it's a strong possibility. And Jason and I were on a customer call yesterday. We set up a fairly open forum, and we got to the end, and my statement to the customers there was, I actually prefer it when we get that harder feedback and we're being told, like, this could be better, or why doesn't it work like this? Because that's feedback that we can be actionable on, and we can feed that into the machine of planning and understanding what customers are doing. I find it very hard to know what to do with positive feedback when it comes to our product. Like, it's great, makes you feel warm inside when you get a customer say, hey, that thing you built is fantastic. The CMG thing, for example, hearing that has helped reduce pain and friction for customers managing remote devices, that's great, but it's not going to derive any future functionality, because if it works great, we're not going to fix it. So I miss the opportunity that we have to hear well phrased critical feedback. Like, just being told something's rubbish is different, but being told why and how, that's really useful.
I think a lot of it comes from synthesizing when you hear things from multiple customers that are somewhat related but somewhat different. Once you can process those into a thing, then you can take action on them. I use the example of the whole idea for co-management came out of a customer meeting, and I believe it was January of 2016 when I was walking out of a customer meeting. It was literally 1 degree outside, and between the front door of the customer building and my Uber, I think a brain cell froze. And so then I processed that, we should have Config Manager and Intune work together. But it's those kind of insights, those epiphanies that you have on these customer visits that it's harder to ascertain in a remote environment, or even through calls. But just the face-to-face, the conferences, the dinners, just the constant the discussion throughout the day really generates new ideas. And we can maintain that, but it's I miss it. So I'll just admit that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And in fact, David and I, we often joke about how we often disagree, but I think it's even rarer that all three of us agree on the same point. Like, that's the stars aligning.
It's the beauty of teams.
we normally at least view the same thing from a slightly different angle. So that was a fairly quick question because we all agreed. My next question is more of an introspective question. I think if 2020 has proved anything, is that the question, where do you see yourself in 5 years, is just completely debunked, because I certainly wouldn't have answered sitting in a room working on my own for 10 hours a day as the answer. But how do you think the 5 years, and 5 years is pretty much the journey of Current Branch. So how do you think the current state of Current Branch compares to the view that you two had? I wasn't in the product group 5 years ago, but I think both of you were pretty much, crucial in that decision to move from upgrading, once every 4.5 years was the average for upgrades prior to the start of Current Branch. It was what got me into the product group, as I was brought in to go work with customers that thought they couldn't upgrade once a year, let alone 3 times a year. And I think personally, from what was an external perspective, the current state of Current Branch is surely way surpasses what you even dreamt of as the future state of the config manager 5 years ago.
Yeah, no, we started with the ambition of going that fast because Windows 10 was going to go that fast. And we knew that we had to ship ConfigMan in sync with Windows 10 to keep patching and operating system deployment working. But yeah, it's crazy that we used to do planning for a product in 5-year increments, right? Code for 2 years, test for 2 years, and then escrow and ship, and then do it again. And it actually led to us making some bad investments because by the time we finally shipped it, that functionality was not really relevant. I think about the function, like the first version of mobile management we did was for CE and like Windows RT, right? And now we, 5 years, we've shipped 15 times for ConfigMan. And I don't even know if we know for sure what we're going to ship 8 months from now. The ability for us to iterate very quickly with customers and get their feedback gives us this incredible sense of agility. And then put that on top of like the 19 million lines of code that is ConfigMan gives us a solid foundation on which we can code things very quickly because there's so much already there. And so 5 years from now, I can't tell you what we'll be building. I can just tell you we'll be listening to customers and innovating near real time for what they need, because that's what we can do now.
Yeah, and to your point earlier about us agreeing and disagreeing, Rob, I think our agreements and disagreements carry much more weight than they used to because they are built basically real-time decisions on what we're going to build in the next release, as opposed to theoretical discussions over what we should do 5 years from now, which are interesting discussions, but they amount to not a whole lot. The in the moment discussion around what to prioritize for the 2010, 2102, 2106, whatever the case may be, are the ones that matter, and those are really completely driven by customer feedback, user voice, and our customer connections, which I think we and our community, our MVP community, which is outstanding, which provides a lot of insight to help us frame what to build next. But to David's point, when we get asked what's the 3-year roadmap question anymore, I have no idea how to answer that because I don't know what the 3-month roadmap is on occasionally because the market conditions change so quickly.
And we joke about the disagreeing, but I always, similar to how I prefer constructive critical feedback, it always gives me a bit more confidence when we've had a discussion because we were viewing the same thing from a slightly different angle. That's what we mean when we say disagreement, right? No one's ever saying it's a square and everyone else is going, no, it's a triangle. It's the disagreement is often a lot more tactical as to how we go about do something. And to me, I always feel a lot more confident when I come out of a planning or a feature meeting or whatever the level of the discussion, be it an LT massive strategic decision or hey, where should we put this click button in the UI? I think when we have those slightly different opinions, I think that generally means that there's been a good discussion for us to get there and go, yeah, we can stand by that decision. If everybody's in agreement, there's probably something we've missed and we need to loop back around and figure out what it is. So yeah, we like to joke about it.
Sometimes David will assert a circle's a circle and he'll just hold on to that position and we can't bend that damn circle into a square no matter what we try. So the circle wins because David owns the resources.
And the code.
In that situation, I find it useful to find an engineer that's able to convince David that the circle or the square that we've built is in fact circle. It's just a very angular circle.
Look over here.
So this is an interesting one. I'm going to ask Jason first. What's your favorite feature in Configuration Manager?
Software updates, because that's the one I owned when I was an individual contributor on the team, and 8 years ago, I invented ADRs. Well, they were pre-invented before I got there, but I shipped them, so I claim invention.
What about you,
Your
David?
favorite
What's
feature
your?
is ADRs.
It's because it's the only feature you can remember. That's why.
I remember we were at with one of your peer dev managers, David. We were at a TAP visit. This individual used to work for you, and she worked on software updates. And I was so excited about ADRs in front of this customer. And after the meeting, I got so much grief from her over my God, I've never seen anyone that excited about ADRs in my life. I was like, oh, they can do this, and they can do this. They can make toast.
That was the first and last time someone got excited about ADRs.
It was, and I still get grief about that moment in the front of that customer when I was so ecstatic. It was my first TAP visit and my first feature, and I just thought this is the coolest thing ever.
To ask me my favorite feature, that's like asking me my favorite child. But
we all know that you could answer that question if you were really pushed.
I answer it in front of my kids all the time. But what really is powerful for me is when a lot of these features work end to end in crazy ways that people didn't foresee, right? Even the engineering team when they build it. So, for example, we already use the example of CM pivot from your phone over CMG down to someone's machine at home. But you take that and you add on Community Hub and proactive scripts and timeline inside the Device Explorer inside Intune. And now what you get is these scenarios, these features that work together end to end where, I could be on a help desk call in Device Explorer, see the device. Community Hub has a remediation from it that I downloaded, put it there. Maybe it's a recent BIOS issue. And so I can rely on the community to get the remediation, ship it, import it, apply it. It goes down to the device over CMG, applies it, brings back statistics. Maybe it worked, maybe it didn't. So I see him pivot it. And just the end-to-end scenarios of all these technologies working together, that's my favorite feature, is that we think about scenarios, not features in isolation, but how do features all fit together to do amazing things.
Yeah, we did such a good job at selling the help desk persona and the help desk scenario internally with your dev team. I spent most of the end of 2019 trying to reinforce with a lot of the engineers that help desk wasn't in fact a single feature, and that it was a scenario of multiple features brought together. Because I had engineers like, yeah, we just shipped help desk. No, we shipped tenant attached. There's a bit more work for us to go do. So yeah, we do a good job at thinking about the scenario. And if I can have another shameless plug to my other session, the MEM02 session, the demo there is, following that life cycle of the various components that we've built, right from, device sync, it appears in the Endpoint Manager Admin Center. You can search for the user. That device has no presence in the cloud other than the fact that config managers put it there. You find that device. Help desk operator then has information that we're surfacing up in terms of, is it online? Who's logged onto it? And then being able to use timeline. Like timeline is such a cool feature, being able to see the events that have occurred on a device. And I think we're only going to snowball that in terms of the data that we put in that. I'm struggling to keep up with the engineering team, to be honest, at times when it's like, hey, Rob, we've got some more sensors that we're going to put in timeline. Can you give us strings? And blimey, yeah, okay, well, we just done the last lot, but yeah, let's go for it. And I think there's so much more that we can do there. But then through to things like the scripting to be able to remediate those issues, being able to just install an app in real time. And then you kind of hinted at it earlier, Jason, with proactive remediation. So, taking those things that normally require a help desk ticket and being able to resolve without the user even knowing, avoiding having to ring the help desk. I think I probably speak for the 7 billion people on the planet that if they can avoid ringing the help desk, they'd prefer that. And I used to work on a help desk, and I think when I worked on the help desk, I'd have done anything to avoid ringing a help desk. So, just not having to go through that troubleshooting and dig into the problem. So proactive remediations is just really cool that we can help customers seek and destroy issues before the user even realizes that it's a problem.
That's a great point, and I both of you guys touched on really salient points around the creativity that our services afford IT that go beyond what they were maybe even originally intended to do. Like, if you think about back when Ignite was a real in-person event, and the things that people would have come up with that they would talk to you about at booth duty or after a session. I typically have to look over and try to find a smart person to answer these questions, but they would string together 8 different features in some unique way that solved a core business problem of theirs. And I think the additive stuff that we've done with CM Pivot and the Endpoint Manager Console, proactive remediations, endpoint analytics, just open up a whole new frontier of IT creativity that they can build on, through whether it's Graph API or other interfaces or just custom scripting that just is the next level of customization that can be done. It works out of the box. I mean, you don't have to be a PowerShell genius to make it work. But if you happen to be and you have a very core business problem, it affords you the ability to, proactive remediation specifically, the ability to really get creative on problem solving in your organization and using not just the built-in service capabilities, but the service as a platform to customize it to your individual use cases.
So I'm looking through the questions, and this isn't quite how it's written, but I'm going to rephrase it for the purposes. We've been doing a lot with Defender ATP integration in both cloud for Intune enrolled devices, but also through tenant attached scenarios. Do one of you want to talk to the vision there and the plan as we try and bring the security and the management roles together in a way that is valuable and works within a customer without the management admin having to give up the keys to their kingdom and vice versa? Does one of you want to talk to that?
Yeah, I can do it. It's funny because over 10 years ago, I was over in Israel trying to decide how we could take 2 different products, Configuration Manager and System Center Endpoint Protection, that were different products. Customers deployed both, and we realized this is a lot of infrastructure that does a lot of the same thing. And then we took System Center Endpoint Protection, we merged it into Configuration Manager to use one infrastructure. But we could have gone further. We could have really built scenarios that merged management and security together. And especially now with this world of analytics and data, that's getting really intriguing. So using the power of management that can push down policy, affect change, monitor on that change, and then the brains of security that Microsoft already applies to our own data centers to keep Azure secure, of data anomaly detection, and syncing those together. Really, I think the sky's the limit on the kind of scenarios that can be done. And the reason it's really intriguing with Microsoft doing this is the better together scenarios with management and security working together is not something you're going to see out there in a product that's only security or a product that's only management. And so I just think the potential down the road of better together scenarios and really doing things more intelligently and more automatically for IT in the security world using the management tools is it's really intriguing, the potential.
I just throw it out there. I also owned endpoint protection and ADRs, so I did both of those. So you're welcome for that as well. I didn't get quite as excited about endpoint protection, but it's no ADRs. But anyway, just clarifying.
Is there anything that you wanted to discuss or make people aware of?
I just want to. You made a really good point earlier, and I just wanted to push that point a little harder. That really, Microsoft Endpoint Manager is the best of cloud and on-prem together. And you really achieve that state by minimally doing tenant attach and optimally doing co-management as well. And so just encourage everyone, it's very low friction to do the tenant attach motion with significant value on the other side of it. It's a completely compliant data pipeline that you as the customer own. So any hurdles you might have on sending data to Microsoft, it belongs to your tenant with complete GDPR, ISO SOC compliance. And just encourage you to start there, but don't stop there. There's a lot of value just as you iterate towards cloud attach through tenant attach, through co-management, through enabling analytics, to taking advantage of the help desk work that Rob talked about, and doing it from a mobile device on top of it all. So I just encourage everyone to take another look at, or take a look if you haven't already at this cloud attach motion, and really get the best of both worlds through cloud attach, and really become a Microsoft Endpoint Manager customer by doing that by doing that tenant attach, and then over time doing that co-management motion as well. So that'd be my parting shot.
Yeah, and I would just add too, on the tenant attached, it's not just that the friction is low, like there's no additional license requirement either, and there's no additional network configuration. If you're already pulling configuration manager updates down, that's the network configuration you need. And if you already are using ConfigMan and license to use it, that's the license you need. There's no other friction just to get the basic functionality of tenant attach up in a cloud UI where you can see all of your devices, even if they're Windows 7, even if they're servers, in one place. It's just high value for very low friction and zero cost.
Right, and I'm glad you mentioned that, David, because another way I like to talk about it is almost really just think about, even if you use another mobility solution or mobile access or mobile application management solution, think of adding Intune to Config Manager to complete your in Microsoft Endpoint Manager configuration. It's really just like adding a role server. It's like adding a CMG. It's like adding a management point, a distribution point. It's irrelevant to your mobility strategy. It's a Windows value add. And if you're already doing Windows with Config Manager, then just think of a cloud attaching Config Manager to Intune as really just adding a high value role server to your environment.
Right. Just like in on-prem Config Man, you attach to Windows Update to get updates so that you could patch. Now you're attaching to the cloud so you can do a lot of other things, including opening up the door to all the analytics potential we're going to deliver. Mm-hmm. And to Jason, to your point, even if you're already using another MDM provider, it doesn't take away from that. You can just add ConfigMan value for low risk, zero cost, zero additional licensing costs. So yeah, there's no reason not to.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I guess final kind of pitch to our user voice site as well. Provide that feedback. We're only just on the beginning of the journey for the Cloud Console. We've referenced Cloud Console and being able to use it from your mobile phone. Use it from anywhere a couple of times. The stat that David and I like to talk about is that when the console was reimagined from 2007 to 2012, it was a combined 300 people years of effort because of the size of the team and the amount of time that they put into really just porting an existing console into a new framework. And we didn't want to hold back the creation and the launch of the Cloud Console behind that same gate, because it won't be 300 years away, but it'd probably be 3 years away if we had 100 people working on it, for 3 years solid. So the Cloud Console is in its infancy. Personally, and it's my feature, so I have an ulterior motive, but we want that feedback as to what we should go build in the Cloud Console and help us prioritize the efforts, because it's going to be serial. It's going to be, slice it, this bit, then this bit, then this bit, and then over time we'll have that full Cloud Console. So, the customer's just as important in that, because, back to our conversation about talking to customers and having those conversations, we don't know what to go build until the customers give us those business problems that we can translate into technology to go solve. So yeah, shout out to the Config Manager user voice site to provide that feedback and let us know where we should be investing our time, because as David said, sometimes we don't even know what we're doing 3 months from now, let alone 3 years from now. So right. It's just part of our agile process. And
something to add on to that, Rob, is something I should have mentioned earlier, but the same way we're trying to converge and unify the IT pro experience, we're also making inroads into the end user experience by unification of the end user company portal on a single pane of glass as well. So, we're approaching this conversion from two angles, but to your point, Rob, that doesn't happen overnight. So we'll chip away at this convergence over time. But same goes for what you'd want to see in company portal from a user voice standpoint. That's important feedback for us as well, because we want to make for a clean experience for both IT pro and end user, and we really want the end user we really want their landing spot, be it company portal, to be ubiquitous, and that's just where they go for stuff. That's where they may go to run a script to fix an issue. They may open a help desk ticket through that interface, install an application. So we want to build on that. We just need to know the right order of things to put into that unification, because we have a very large software center interface as well that we need to drive prioritize convergence in the company portal off of. So same goes for that user voice area as well.
Yeah, I was thinking about how we could try and fit that into the narrative, but you just got a pry bar and just jimmied it straight. There was no certainty.
It fell out of your beard somewhere middle of the conversation. So
jealous. There's a whole bunch of sessions that we're doing throughout the event. If you've not seen them already, go check them out on the Video Hub. And if you missed the live sessions from Brad Anderson or any of the other executives, the equivalent of keynotes, make sure you check those out as well. And if you want to learn more, there's this website that we've created, so you can go check that out. And really, it's just last thing to do is say thanks for watching, assuming you made it through this far. Basically, this was just a recorded one-on-one, really. It really wasn't that different to how some of our post-meeting meetings go. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.